And at some point, like Ethereum clients are just going to kind of delete the old code and they're not going to speak the old language anymore. Transaction history before the merge, it will still be in this proof of work chain. And at some point, like Ethereum clients are just going to kind of delete the old code and they're not going to speak the old language anymore. And people are going to have to kind of either use old nodes or create special purpose protocols to handle really old data. So that like I think that's just a kind of necessary technical decision, right? Because we are trading off a couple of different factors, right? Like on the one hand, we definitely do not want Ethereum nodes to just continue becoming more unwieldy and more complex to build and run over time, right? And so if you don't want that, then like the only way to do that is to forget old things, right? To forget like older transactions, older protocol rules, and like have the newer versions of the software focus on just being able to process the chain as it is today and say as it was in the last like say year or two. But if you still want to go in and look at things that happened before, like you will be able to, right? And there's already third-party protocols, like for example, the graph is one thing that people are starting to use to look up history more efficiently. So there are going to be a lot of ways to do that if you still just need to access history for whatever reason, but it's just sort of being taken out of the scope of like the things that a node has to do in order to be an Ethereum node that's part of the network. I don't think it would compromise immutability, right? Because like the hash chain is still there, right? If you want to go audit it, like you can still check that, you know, every block had a hash of the previous block, and then you look up the previous block, and then that block has a hash of its own previous block, and you keep looking it up. Like there's no way whatsoever that an attacker would be able to like give you fake old blocks and convince you that they're real old blocks, because like for every one of these old blocks, if they're real, you would be able to come up with a proof, and if they're fake, like there's no way the attacker can make a proof. It is definitely like there is, I think, a real kind of cultural difference in expectations versus like something like Bitcoin, for example, right? Like where in the case of like the Bitcoin ecosystem, they really value this idea that you with a present day Bitcoin node can just go and validate every single thing that happened from day one. And in the case of Ethereum, like that's not really true, right? And if you actually want to go personally check that everything is fine, then like at some point you would have to like, you know, go back into history, use an older version of the Ethereum clients to check the older part of the chain, then use a newer version to check the newer part of the chain. And like, that is definitely a somewhat different kind of relationship between the community and the chain. And like that's true in other ways as well, right? So like, for example, with proof of stake, like we talk about weak subjectivity and how like one of the trade-offs of proof of stake is that to get the full security guarantees, you do like there is some kind of like minimum frequency, like you have to kind of log on at least once every certain number of weeks or months. And that's also something that proof of work does not have, right? So like there's definitely trade-offs being made. I mean, obviously the fact that we're doing this means that we think that the benefits are much higher than the costs, but you know, the trade-offs do exist as well, and that's fine.